Hey everyone, welcome to Everybody Studios. This is another episode of Everybody in Charlotte, and I am so excited because I have one of my favorite people in Charlotte. We have Miss Julia Landauer, and she is a two-time race car driver champion here. She works also at NASCAR. She is a STEMinist, or a STEM enthusiast, you might say, a podcast host and a keynote speaker, and also just an all-around badass. So welcome, Julia. So glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. We were talking about how we go way back in our Charlotte time. I feel like I've been here for almost 10 years now, and we met very early on. And
Very
it's
early on.
it's just been so cool to see you build your company and your brand and all of your efforts. And as we were just talking about, like cheering on our friends doing really cool stuff.
And you are 100% one of those people. And the way that you talk about other women and lift people up, I mean, you always are living out your mission and your brand. And it was a no duh to bring you on here.
Oh,
So
thank
I just
you.
want to hear about all the good things that you're doing right now. I know that COVID shifted a lot of things with career, and
Yeah.
I just want to hear all the good things.
Yeah. So for listeners, I have been racing since I was 10 years old. I'm 32 now. And I, in 2020, raced full time in the European NASCAR series, which was super cool. My husband's French. I got to live with his family in France while I was racing. It was very challenging. But that was the last full time season I had. And then I struggled a bit with funding, sponsorship. Racing is very expensive. But in 2022, I was able to pitch companies who were NFT brands. And the NFTs and Web3 was just a technological interest that I had. I went down the rabbit hole, was able to find some sponsorship out of it with Boss Beauties, which is a women's empowerment brand, and Garage XYZ, Adam Car Club. And so it was just really, really cool. A bunch of nerds coming together to get on track. And I made 2 starts in the NASCAR Xfinity series, which is our second highest level. After that, it didn't quite take off the way I had hoped, and so at kind of the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I started thinking about what the pivot to my next chapter would be, and I landed at NASCAR working on the strategy and innovation team.
And look at you now. I mean, you're literally everywhere. You've traveled all over the world. What makes Charlotte the place for you? I mean, and I know you have your French husband and you guys travel a lot, but was wondering, what makes Charlotte a special place for you?
Yeah, so I have to admit it is purely because of NASCAR.
Hmm.
And I went to Stanford and was in the Bay Area, and I was one of the few people who was moving to North Carolina. But this is where NASCAR is headquartered. It's where all the teams are up north of Charlotte and Mooresville and Cornelius and Statesville and stuff. And it's been really interesting. I'm from New York City, though, and I will say it was an adjustment being in a smaller city. Being car based, ironically, has been tough. It's been a tough adjustment to not take the subway or walk everywhere. But it's really comfortable. We have a beautiful home now, and it's been really cool. And it's really nice to have quite a short commute to the uptown offices for NASCAR, and it's pretty easy to get to a lot of places.
Oh, I love that I've been able to kind of know you for so many years here, and then also I had the privilege to see you speak at my company's event. It was a meetup, WeWork in 2019, and I remember you talking about pushing past your fear.
Yeah.
And I would love to know, just from your experience, what are the things that help you get through any kind of fear when it comes to career or just personal things? To me, you're this fearless woman. You've done what a lot of women have always dreamed of doing, or maybe you're afraid to because there's not a lot of us there in that space. And I know you do get this a lot when it comes to being a woman in these different male dominated fields, but how do you push forward?
Well, I want to kind of zone in on what you said about how I must be fearless, because that's something that a lot of people told me when I was like a teenage girl racing cars or in my early 20s. And so I kind of just accepted, yeah, probably fearless. But more recently, I've been digging into the fact that it's probably not that I'm fearless and that
Hmm.
I do get scared, and that it comes down to managing fear and working with fear. And something that I've realized only recently, after thinking about this for many years, is that in go karting, the go kart is fast and it's scary, and I had to pragmatically work through it, and then I would master it, and then I would have to level up, and then I would be scared again because the new go kart was faster. And so it's just my entire racing career was kind of this cycle of being scared, working through it, and mastering it. And so I feel really lucky that from an early age, being scared was an okay part of the process. It wasn't something to avoid, it was just something that you work through. And so, there are a couple of things that I do in general, I always err on the side of going for it. If I'm scared, if I'm questioning, that's my personality. I think that thinking about the risks and benefits can be really helpful. And if you think about it and there's not really a terribly bad consequence, like you owe it to yourself to try. And the other thing is to figure out the little things that you can do to help your central nervous system get back to a more neutral state. So like I sprint before every race because it helps exert some energy and takes away those negative like antsy nerves or deep breathing or listening to music or whatever it might be.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I just feel like you epitomize also just being genuine about that, embracing, hey, maybe it does scare me a little bit, but that's probably a good sign to just go for it and push forward. So I
Yeah.
love that that's also part of your personality. But I'm also thinking back to we did an interview at Seacrest Studios
We did.
way back when, right? And one of the main questions some of the kids had was, what do you do when you have to go to the bathroom?
Oh,
And I know you probably get
classic.
this all the time, but I'm thinking even for adults, I mean, you are racing for how long are these races and how fast are you going?
Anywhere from like 30 minutes for a little sprint race to the longest race I've done is close to 3 hours.
3 hours. And if you have to go to the bathroom, what do you do?
So as you get older, you get better at timing your hydration. So something that I think a lot of people don't realize is, especially in a stock car, in a NASCAR car, that we're all enclosed, the motor's up front, and so it can be 150 degrees in there in the summers. It's humid. It is disgusting, and it's
And this is
very
how you
hot.
deal with the house being hot with your
Oh
husband right
yeah,
now
now that we keep the
with
air
no
conditioner a
OC.
little higher. But so it's really hot. So you're sweating profusely. So you do sweat out a lot of your liquids, but a lot of what you have to do is time it because you don't want to be underhydrated,
Hmm.
because that's really not good for long endurance heat events. We use a lot of electrolytes, but you don't want to be too hydrated. And on the off chance that you didn't time it right, or if there's a delay and you're stuck in your car, if you gotta go, you
You
gotta
gotta
go.
go.
But I
You
will
just
say it
keep
is
going.
harder. This is going to be TMI, but it is harder to relax your muscles enough to go to the bathroom in a place you're not supposed to go to the bathroom.
That makes sense though. That's
Like
not TMI.
the amount of focus, and so the context here was that it was a race where we had a rain delay and the track drying equipment didn't work anymore. It broke. And so in order for us to get our race in, we need the tracks to be dry. And so we actually, all of us competitors, got on the track and just did like pace car laps, like slow, just trying to use our tires and our cars that were hot to dry the track. And so we had fueled, but then we were in the car for essentially the length of a race, and then we had to go do our race. And so
Hmm.
we were just in the car so much longer than I had ever been in the car, and my timing was totally off. And I knew that I couldn't be uncomfortable with these really tight seat belts and everything. And so again, it was just like this immense amount of focus to calm down and to relax. And apparently it doesn't smell great for the crew members that have to clean it up afterwards. So sorry again to my guys who had to handle that
But I bet you did
afterwards.
great in the race and
Got a
things.
top 3, so it was,
There we
what, it
go.
was worth it.
That's what I'm talking about. Still get that top three. And I would love to know, from your perspective, has anyone ever underestimated you and you just came forward and you're like, I'm gonna do this. I've never tried harder in my life, and then you don't underestimate yourself. What do you say to that person, maybe who's ever underestimated you in some capacity?
Yeah, so this is something that I feel really passionately about in a number of different ways that you can look at it, because what I tell people is like, if you walk into a room or walk onto a team and the people who are there underestimate you,
Hmm.
you can feel that energy. You can feel that negative energy that's kind of a suck. And then as a woman in a male dominated field, I felt like, okay, now I have to put that much more effort into earning the respect and getting to the baseline that maybe some of my male competitors have off the bat. And so, in some ways, it's frustrating. And in some ways, it means that I'm very intentional when I do join a team, and I'm very purposeful in how I project myself, how I talk with people, how I build those relationships to try to minimize their underestimation. But on the flip side, it also means that when you have particularly guys or team owners or something where they don't underestimate you, that's a really powerful form of allyship. And male allies are super important. I will be the first to admit that some of my strongest seasons have been when I have really great male allies. And sometimes that's more explicitly, like being vocal, speaking up, like, breaking that divide verbally. but then it's also implicitly like not underestimating. And a team owner who just expected that I would be able to win, that changes the whole dynamic of the team. And you have to earn it. You have to, like, your results speak for themselves. But to have results and then also be underestimated is where it gets frustrating. So shout out to all the guys and all the people, any of the majority, quote unquote, who don't underestimate the minority in any group. It's really powerful, and we notice it, and we thank you.
We definitely notice it. And also, you answered that beautifully when I asked the question absolutely horribly. So
I knew
well
exactly
done.
what you meant, though. We
Well
go through the same
done.
stuff. Thank you.
Well done. And so another question going back to Charlotte,
Yeah.
are there certain places that you love to go to here, certain activities or anything that you would recommend to someone who's maybe coming from out of the country and wants to check out Charlotte?
Yeah, okay, so a few areas in Charlotte. So I love running through Myers Park and going to the Duke Mansion and just seeing the beautiful gardens and the flowers and nature is just really incredible. A few of my favorite restaurants are Restaurant Constance, which is amazing.
I haven't been
Oh,
actually.
you have to go. It's incredible. It's tiny. Make a reservation. I really like Mizu. I really
I
like
love
Puerta.
Mizu.
I will say the Charlotte restaurant scene has definitely gotten better.
Amen. Amen. Since we first
was
got
not
here.
impressed when I first got
Well,
here.
when we come from New York, you have literally everything.
I know
and
I'm
then-
spoiled, yeah. But no, recently I think the restaurant scene has gotten a lot better. Counter is a fun splurge if you want to go on a fancy date night. So I really like that. And yeah, I think checking out the little neighborhoods like Noda is really cool. And Plaza Midwood, I used to live there and I really like Plaza. I know it's changing a little bit, but finding those little pockets, and I think especially the mix of urban and nature that you do find in a place like Plaza is really, really pretty.
I love it. I'm totally with you on that. And you're also a podcast host and you're doing public speaking all the time. What are your little tidbits of advice for people who want to get a speaking career started or maybe they're afraid to start a podcast themselves?
Ooh, be ready for a lot of work. As you know, podcasting is a lot of work. To start with the podcasting, I think what I'm learning, and it's challenging because there's so much content out there, really zoning in on specifically what it is that you want to talk about. You're not going to be everything to everyone, and you also to be flexible in what that looks like. I started my podcast with really almost like academic, educational, like thought pieces on different things like navigating identity shifts. Shifting from a race car driver to my next stage was a big grieving process and going into that. And then it's also, okay, I want to incorporate guests because it's always fun to talk to people and get a new perspective. So being flexible and maintaining, being okay going for all the work, even if it's hard, as long as you're enjoying it. For keynote speaking, it is such a fun craft, I think, and I'm realizing how much I appreciate being able to engage with an audience. And I watch comedians who do that too, and it's just so impressive because to capture an audience's attention for so long is hard. And so I fall in the general motivation category. So I tell personal stories that are rooted in themes like taking ownership, perseverance, working with fear, stuff like that. And so I like to think of it as having a conversation with the audience. You're not speaking to people, you're speaking with people. And as a 20-something, 30-something-year-old race car driver, I don't think there was a set way that I was supposed to be on stage. So I got to be my kind of quirky, engaging self on stage, and it worked. But put yourself out there, pitch yourself, really master the craft and practice and, kind of have that narrative arc and, know your value. And, sometimes it's really great to do something for free and sometimes you know what you're worth and it's not worth it. So it's a weird, fairly opaque industry, but it's all about experimentation.
And you've navigated that beautifully.
But it's taken 10 years, right? Like I did almost 10 years. So I pitched my first speaking engagement in 2015, right after I'd moved to Cornelius for 6 months. And I had given a TEDx talk at Stanford called Can Nice Girls Win Races? And so I knew that I had this polished product that I could show with people. But it was still tons of outreach. It was a lot of cold emails and then having to figure out how much I wanted to charge and all that stuff. And it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of building relationships, just like anything. And I think that's kind of what I'm learning. My parents were always right about. It's all about relationships, all about, having empathy for people, and that vulnerability will take you far, I think.
100%. And social capital is everything.
Huge. And you know
Yep.
that. I mean, I feel like that's kind of a pillar of everything you do. And it's so fun to kind of see for me, random pockets that I see you pop up in and random events that I see. I'm like, oh my goodness, she is just like walking the walk of really engaging with the community and I think people see authenticity. I think especially younger generations, as you know, are really sensitive to authenticity and inauthenticity, and that's
Hmm.
something I've always admired with you, is that you
Oh.
bring that authenticity. So
Well,
yeah,
you do too. You're a champion for women. You're champion race car driver, champion everything. But I love the way you speak up about women and lifting them up. Your friends, people you work with, and you do that every day. And you're talking about what you've been building the last 10 years. I'd love for this to kind of be like a time capsule too. When we look at this in another 10 years, where do you want to see yourself? Or like maybe
yeah.
speak to your third. Well, I guess it would be your 42-year-old self.
Yeah, oh my gosh, wow. Getting older is a journey. Like, my knees hurt even just from an exercise like a workout I did like 2 days ago.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're only 31, 32.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
I'm no longer a peak level athlete, as I've learned.
You are. You
No.
are.
But no, so I think a few things. I think 30s are a really interesting time, especially for women, because if you do want to have kids, like, I don't like to say that the clock is ticking, but it kind of is. And so navigating how you do what you want to do while also keeping the big picture in mind. It's an interesting balance, and I'm really lucky
Mm.
that my husband and I are very communicative and vocal and on the same page. And but it's a transition. It's thinking about us and me and ourselves to what does the future look like. And so I think I'm learning that I really love building stuff. I really love the creative outlet. I'm very lucky that I can work at NASCAR and continue doing the creative stuff that I like to with speaking and podcasting. I really love problem solving and helping get shit done at work, for lack of a better phrase. Sorry, don't know if I'm supposed to curse or not, but
You're fine.
but I do have a bit of a trucker mouth. So learning, like, building and bringing people together and leaning on people for their strengths and collaborating is really, really cool. So I don't yet know what that looks like. It might be at NASCAR for the next however many decades. It might not be. I don't know, but kind of understanding what about the process and the journey I really enjoy, and trying to lean into that while also paying bills. I will admit it's nice to have a paycheck. This is the
Amen.
first time
Something
I've had a
very
paycheck
dependable. I
get it. I get it. It's
Oh, yeah.
fun.
Well, you're just an amazing human. Thank you for being a part of everybody in Charlotte and continuing to give back to our community, but then also giving back to so many women everywhere. You're someone I look up to, and I know that the people that are listening to this that didn't know you prior are definitely going to be following your career, and you're just amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for sharing voices. And again, like, it's all about lifting people up. And I do really try to lean into the abundance mindset, that's not me or her, me or them. It's like we can all thrive, and someone else thriving does not diminish my ability to thrive. And I think if more people took that mindset, which requires putting your ego aside sometimes, and I'll admit that can be hard sometimes, but I think that's when communities really thrive. So thank you for having me, and thank
Of
you to all the
course.
listeners. And yeah, I'm excited to see what your next 10 years looks like
Oh,
too.
thanks. We'll see. Well, like you said, there's room for everybody. So
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Everybody in Charlotte. If you want to host your own podcast here at Everybody Studios, you can do that. We'll be back for another episode next week. Thanks for listening. I'm Meredith Dean.